Hey guys, it's Vince. I want to thank you for joining me to discuss a very, very, very important topic that typically I've never seen a video on this on YouTube covering this, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to regurgitate what's readily available on YouTube. There's a lot of crap on there, and most of it, honestly, is still inadequate information, so to speak. This is a topic that I feel a necessity to cover because, again, this has been an issue that has come up numerous times. The issue that just came up with it, I had a client come to me and ask me an evaluation on a system that he bought used, and we started discussing some things, and we found some things and reviewed some things, and that made me think, it's time for a video that explains this. And the topic that I'm talking about is cooling. How important is it, and really, where are you going with the cooling? Well, let me tell you how important it is with a CNC. Anybody who's dealing in machinery, robotics, cooling is probably up there with power. Okay? If you're generating anything with power, with electricity, cooling is a necessity, especially with electronics, guys. I'm hoping everybody realizes this. However, I don't feel it's ever taken to the level of seriousness that it should. And that's why I really want to do a video and cover this, because it actually frightens me to think how many people try to save a buck on probably something that will save their butt at least once in the end and really make their equipment the longevity of their equipment will be extended, tremendously. Cooling is essential not just for the controller, for your system entirely. When I say that, okay, if your system is in the environment you plan to build your system or keep your system in is your garage, which typically that's garage or basement. Typically it's a garage. Where I live in Florida, we don't really have basements, so it's a garage. Where, again, across the country, it may be different locations. Please take cooling into consideration. Please understand these systems are precision grade systems. What you're building is a robot. It's not designed to be in the elements. It's not designed to be in human environments. Take that all into consideration. The variables you're dealing with here when you're assembling this equipment and leaving it in these environments, it's huge. Okay, and it really, like I said, this video is going to cover a lot. It's not going to be short. It's definitely going to be, I hope you got some popcorn and are ready to listen, but I think you'll learn something with it. So I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to discuss one of the big things that I get asked a lot about is used equipment. Okay, and everybody is trying to save a buck. I understand that. You want to get the most bang for your buck. And typically what I get is, hey, Vin, I found a system on Craigslist, and what do you think of this system for the price the guy is offering? Well, let me tell you what I think. Okay? First of all, I'm not going to BS you. I'm going to tell you the way it is. I hope you respect that. If a guy is selling a $10,000 or $15,000 system for $5,000, either he needs a lot of money, he needs money really, really, really quick, or something's amiss. Okay? Naturally, that old saying where if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. It's usually that case. Although I have seen, and I'm not going to lie, I've encountered it myself. People need money right away, or a guy's in a full, he's in a full shop. He doesn't need this piece of equipment anymore. It's paid itself off. He really doesn't care what he gets. He just wants to get rid of it. I have been in that case. So I'm not going to say there's never a case where you can find a really good deal. There are some. It's just, of course, it's rare. So let's just hypothetically say I get that message, which I usually do, and I review it. First thing I look for on that machine, the first most critical thing I look for on that machine is surface rust. If I see surface rust on that machine, that means that machine was in an environment that was not climate controlled or not climate controlled properly. Okay? When I say that, that means not a fan. I'm not talking about, circulating hot air over hot air. That's not what we're talking about, where the window is open and that's considered, air conditioning. I'm sorry, guys. No, that's not it. You can rest assured if you're buying a piece of equipment like that, it's all full of surface rust. All of that surface rust that may just be on the surface and look cosmetic, you can remove it. You can make the machine look new, but do not be foolish enough to believe that machine and all the electronics in that machine have no effect from that humidity that machine has been placed in, because you would be sadly mistaken. Okay, so think about that. Think about, again, you don't need to speak to the owner necessarily of the machine, because they can tell you anything. Okay, they're wanting to sell the item. They don't care about you, the end user. If you believe they do, I hate to tell you, 9 out of 10 of them don't. They're looking to make their money back. Okay, be cautious. And even if you are Mr. Optimism, think logically, in the sense that you're dropping a lot of money. $5,000 is still a lot of money. Think about that. If you see a machine and it has surface rust over everything, you know what that is. If you see environmental marks, and I call them environmental marks from, equipment that has not been treated properly, just because you know where it was placed, you can rest assured that stress on that equipment was far greater than a properly sold used machine in the proper environment. I tell guys this all the time, whether it be a CNC, a drill press, a table saw. If you're buying equipment and you notice things on that equipment, and you should always be looking for those details, because those bite you. When you see it's full of surface rust, if you see a drill press, I've seen this numerous times, you see the chuck is all rusted, the base is rusted, everything is rusted. You already know the life of that unit, whether or not it was used once or 100 times, billion times, doesn't matter, is going to be much greater in roughness than a piece of equipment in an air-conditioned environment. It was properly ventilated. It was used properly by a person that understood it. You're always going to see that. And it's funny because it directly reflects on the equipment itself. Okay? When you guys look at my boxes, I could sit here and BS you all day long, but if you open it up and you look at it, you'll know right away either I know what I'm talking about or I don't, because you're smart enough to know what should be and what shouldn't be. Well, that's what I'm discussing now. I want you to understand what most of us know, but some things are hidden. And that's what CNC is about. It's about finding those hidden areas and detailing all of the troubleshooting areas to make it to where everybody is aware of them and there's less secrets, because the more you know, the more you're empowered with the knowledge, you're going to know what to look for. Okay, so that being said, I really want you to take into consideration that if you're buying a used machine, the first thing we look for, and when I don't care where it is, if they have a picture of it, you have enough information right there to analyze the life of that machine, if you're smart enough. The more pictures they take, it's going to give away more information. If other areas in the machine are showing environmental signs of misuse, you're going to find it. So take that into consideration prior to dropping your good money. Okay. Now, some owners, they're obviously honest about it. Some people have said, look, I've got it out here. You can always ask them too, hey, where did you have this at? Did you have it in a climate controlled environment? Did you take care of it? How often was PM done on the machine? That's preventative maintenance. When did you go over the machine? When did you service it? These are questions all should come up, but again, I'm talking just about cooling right now. I won't go into too much detail with that, but I'm giving you guys a really good crash course in what you can look for. The next thing, and this is the most critical because I deal with it on a daily basis, is the controllers. And let me tell you something. I'm on Gecko's website right now, and I only sell Gecko Drives because you guys know how I feel. Gecko Drive is number one, not just in support and quality of products, and guys are made in the U.S. I respect them highly. I've never had a company support me the way I have as far as with builds and any type of tech support issues. They're wonderful. One of the interesting things is on their site directly, if you go on their link for the G540, you're going to find an article, if you look close enough, called the G540 heat sinking experiment. That's actually what I believe it's heat sinking. They may have changed it, but it used to be called the heat sinking experiment. Either way, it consists of a lot of research done about cooling the G540. And this pertains to any CNC, mind you. I deal with Gecko, but this is information. Hopefully it'll find the right people that deal with anything with CNC. So that being said, what I'm covering now is something you can definitely take to the bank. You can definitely review this article. I hope you do. Check everything I'm telling you in this video to see if I'm accurate, because I hope you do. You'll find out very shortly that I don't BS anybody. I tell it the way it is. Regardless if it make you happy or not. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes being truthful means you gotta, hurt someone's feelings, so to speak. That being said, I really want to focus. I'm not going to bore you with all the bar graphs and all this other information. I want to focus on the conclusion of this experiment on their site, and I'm going to read to you word for word. And I really want you to pay attention to what I'm reading. I'm going to start right now. It says conclusion. Any control box containing a G540 must have an adequate input and exhaust fan or an exhaust fan and an internal fan to circulate the air. The red graph shows if the G540 is left in still air or in a sealed environment under full load, it will overheat, which may result in damage to the G540. The green and blue graphs show the effectiveness of a circulation fan. Note from the blue graph that nothing is gained by having a fan heatsink combination. Every degree above 25 degrees Celsius ambient will push the peak temperature up 1 degree as well. It is recommended to monitor the temperature in your case to take this into account. Well, guys, let me tell you something. That's a mouthful right there. Okay, that paragraph right there should scare everybody into understanding how important cooling is. But I'm going to clarify a couple points that kind of bother me with this paragraph. There's one thing in particular where it says the fan heatsink combination shows nothing. When you properly go to cool something, we all know, I hope we all know, and if we don't, Google it again. There's always Wikipedia and all these other sources out there. You can double check what I'm saying, or just open your computer. If you're interested in CNC, you'll find out real quick what I'm saying is accurate. Heat sinking is not an option. If you're trying to cool something properly, okay, you definitely want a heat sink and a fan combination because the heat sink naturally expands the surface area of the item you're trying to cool, which in turn makes it easier to cool, and on top of that carries the heat away from the object much more efficiently, and the fan then circulates the air around it. Again, how do I know this? Guys, I'm telling you professionally, and I'm telling you it as a person who's been around this. I've been in computers for the last 18 years. I've dealt with my CNC business for the last 5, and I've been in CNC and manufacturing production engineering now for, oh God, has to be 14 years. So please understand what I'm telling you is fact. Cooling is essential. Cooling is a must. Electronics that you're buying for this precision grade machinery, it is super critical to keep that unit and to protect your investment at the proper operating temperatures. Now, what I want to point out here on this graph is a Gecko without any cooling is at 83 degrees Celsius. Okay? Now, here's the other point I want to discuss. Do you believe that at 180 degrees is where that Gecko stays if you have a actual power supply in an enclosure with it without a fan? Now let's think about this. Your power supply that's supplying power to the Gecko is expelling heat from its unit itself and condensing it in an environment, which is the enclosure. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink real quick. Okay? It's in an enclosure that's actually confining all of that heat like your oven. It's using convection heating now to heat up everything. So if you really believe that your unit's going to stay at 83 degrees Celsius, if that's the max case temperature, you're crazy. I would never test that theory. Okay? You want to hope, remember what I told you in a couple other videos, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Okay? That's really what you want to do. Always think like that. So in this situation, if you have a G540 in an enclosure with no circulating air and the power supply, I can assure you your temperature, you're really risking it going at least that. I would say it'll go way more than that because of the extra heat coming from the power supply that's being expelled. So think about what I'm saying. Think about it. It makes perfect sense. It's science. It's fact. You want to protect your investment. You guys are smarter than that. Hopefully you found this video in time. That pretty much explains, in a nutshell, the truth. I want you to now, right after this video, I invite you, I can't encourage you more, go on to Google. Google search all the controllers that you see on the market featuring a Gecko, featuring any drivers. Now, one thing I will say, and I got to take a sidestep here and tell you the truth, the Chinese, the one thing they do on most of their drivers is integrate a heatsink. And some of them even integrate fans. I got to applaud them for that, guys. That's actually very, very smart. Unfortunately, the guys that are using drives without heat sinks, without fans, and who claim to understand CNC, take that into consideration of who you're buying it from, guys. If you're finding a fan in a case with no heat sinks, or a fan that's indirectly just sucking the heat out, that's okay, pending the item is heat sinked. If your drive is not heat sinked, guys, you're still running a risk. It's not being optimally cooled with a unit running heat sink. So always think about that. They should work in conjunction together. It's synergistic. Look up that word if you don't know what it means. Basically, it just means that it's amplifying the effect. Okay? So really think about what I'm saying to you, because it's imperative. I mean, what I'm telling you now is fact. So take that into consideration. If you notice and you go Google searching and you're shopping for your controller and you're looking at ideas of which is the one to go with, or how to build one even, hell, think about that. If you look at these systems, these guys out there who are claiming to be professionals and they're selling all this equipment, ask why is it an option? Why are they selling these as an option? Shouldn't it be imperative and be standard equipment? Doesn't that make logical sense? When you buy a computer from Dell or you buy a computer from HP, is it optional to get a heat sink and a fan? Hell no, it ain't. Why? Because they know the unit requires it to function. This should be no different. And if you're going to build a controller, damn it, do it right. And that's the way I sit here and I tell you, and it frustrates me because I get questions all the time, and it's mainly because of inadequate information online about these things. And what you're learning is fact. This is what I do. This is what I live. This is what I breathe. This is what I'm telling you. Don't let this bite you. Engineer the problem out before it becomes a problem. That's when you know you've gained that much more knowledge, and it will save you money in the long run. You know, what I'm telling you now is fact, and it will definitely save you money. So now that you know heat sink and fan, do the review. You're going to do that. You're going to check in Google. I know you are. And you're going to see how many guys actually include a heat sink and a fan. And you're going to find out very few do, if any. I think I'm the only one I've ever seen that actually does a standard equipment, not charging you extra for it. It's integrated in the price. I want you then to think about your equipment. Okay, we already got your controller basically straightened out. I want you to think about your equipment. Case in point, I got a perfect example right here. I'm going to pull it up right now. Okay, a guy messaged me. Again, you can see this is my eBay account. A guy messaged me, and I asked him to send me a picture of the used electronics that he bought on. He was explaining to me about his system, and here's what he sent me. Okay, and this is exactly the kind of shoddy work that ends people's dream of learning this, ends people's, everything you've put into saying, hey, I want to learn and do this right. This is where you run into headaches. And I really want you to look at this, because I'm going to just cycle through these pictures, and you could see so many things here wrong that makes absolutely no sense. I mean, the more I look at these type of things, it frightens me, okay? First of all, we've got his Xilex board. Okay, that's the manufacturer. He confirmed that they were using telephone lines, believe it or not, as the motor cables. Okay, you could see that the cables are all shoddy. Everything here is mounted on a piece of wood. They're using slight standoffs, he explained to me, on the board. They're using a fan that's zip-tied, half-assed in place. I mean, guys, come on. Come on, he's smart enough to know this wasn't right. We're working out a system for him. Let's use common sense here, guys. This right here is not only improper and impractical, it's dangerous. I mean, you're dealing here with electronics. This is just danger. That's all I see is danger. You're thinking this is only 24 volts, 50 volts, whatever the hell it is. Think logically here. How safe is this? Okay, bolted on a board. Nothing here is, you could tell already that the motor cables, they're already showing a lot of signs of wear. And again, if you look, you could tell this equipment was definitely out in the elements. You could tell from the coating on the cable, it starts changing in colors really quick. It doesn't look dirty like it's been handled, but it definitely looks like it's been outside. I look at the wood it's mounted to. You could tell it's shaded. It's not because it was sealed or it was stained. It's actually shaded because of that. The connectors over here, you can see it. I don't know if you could see it in this video because I'm not. Here we go. Let's see if this picture, you could probably see the connectors and the wiring. You can see the wiring looks shoddy. That's what I'm talking about, guys. This is the kind of stuff. You see 3 individual heat sinks covering his chipset when he would be more efficient making one solid piece of aluminum, correct? And then having the fan blow over the aluminum and you're good, okay? This, even if you're going to mount it to a piece of wood or whatever substrate you're going to mount it to, we should have looked at that, okay? But again, that's what we're looking at, okay? So basically, you could see now what we're talking about. And as far as cooling goes, this same guy, we were talking about the location and whatnot of where his machine was. And when he told me it was going to be outside in his shop, that's what got me to thinking, you know, he may not have been having problems now with it, but later on, he may have problems with it. So I've got to be honest with him and tell him the truth. You know, if you're putting it in Texas in a shop and you're saying the only cooling you have is to open up the 3 doors in your shop and that's the kind of cooling you have, well, we already know that if it's 105 outside in Texas, you're letting 105 degree air in a machine that's already generating its own heat. It doesn't take long to figure out your machine won't last long, guys. And I'm just telling you, and you really got to think about that. And thank God he listened. He's a very smart guy. He was listening. And all you guys I deal with are smart guys. You really understand it when I start talking about it. It's just pointing out these things. A lot of times you're so focused on other areas, people aren't pointing this stuff out to you. And typical vendors, they're not pointing stuff out. They're typically just looking at, you know, selling a product. I don't want to just sell a product. You know, I mean, I can do that. I'm not trying to just push my products on you and say, hey, buy this. What I'm doing is I'm trying to protect you and your investment and saying, hey, if you're going to buy, do it right. Education will lead you to that right choice. It's just, you know, finding all the bits and pieces to get that education properly. That's what I'm trying to cover right now. So after we spoke, after we covered that, and I explained to him I didn't want to sell him an enclosure. I didn't want to sell him components if he was going to put it outside in that environment, because I knew what he's doing to the equipment. And you know what? He agreed. He understood it right when I said it. And he said, you know, I wasn't looking at that. And that was it. You know, once you guys understand that, it makes sense. We put together a package and we figured out a solution for him was to keep the controller inside the office part. He had a climate control part of the office, and we would just have cables long enough to run the wires to the motors outside in the environment. Now, I'm going to tell you truthfully, if it's still 100 degrees out in his shop and he's putting his machine out there, to have that shop still not climate controlled, I disagree with. I would eventually, and I told him that, I would put a window unit in, because it's going to wear on your equipment. It does wear on the equipment. It wears on a lot of things. You know, you're talking about, you know, the way everything is in the environment you're machining in. That's what's going to dictate overall what kind of quality products you're getting. You know, I came from a true manufacturing of firearms background, so I know that when, you know, you're dealing with surface rust, you're dealing with, you know, any type of moisture in the air on any aluminum or metal substrate. Aluminum doesn't rust, but by the same token, we're trying to keep everything nice. We're trying to keep it professional. And if you're trying to keep it professional, you know, the last thing you want to deal with is surface rust. You don't want to be in a time constraint. Oh, God, I just milled this, and, you know, now I got to work. Even with wood, you're dealing with, you know, the expansion and contraction theories. You're dealing with moisture in the wood. I mean, you're dealing with all this stuff already. Why make it harder when you're machining, when you can just think about, okay, the environment I'm in, is this applicable to what I'm doing? You're not a mechanic. You're not looking at this like you're a car mechanic and, you know, it's okay. And I got to be honest with you, dude. Most of the guys today, truthfully, most mechanics are smart enough today to know they'll have a climate-controlled environment. I have dealerships by me are always climate-controlled for that reason. So, I mean, if the heat is just too intense, the tools rust, you get a lot of problems, the guys aren't comfortable, and that's another thing. If you're a machinist or you're trying to be a machinist and you're trying to learn or you're trying to do things professionally, guys, think about your comfort. If you're in an environment that's hot and sweaty and miserable, you're not going to want to be in that environment. Your body is not going to want to be in that environment, certainly not for a long period of time. So think in that perspective, think of your body. If your body doesn't like to be overheated, why would equipment that you're spending thousands of dollars on? You know, I mean, you have to think like that and really think about what you're looking at doing over the long run. That's why I say analyze everything scientifically that way and you'll be fine. The details with CNC are what will bite you the first. I mean, there's nothing that will bite you harder than the details of what you're dealing with. And everything with these controllers and the machines are affected, especially by your environment. Another story, and I'll just make this quick. I did a service call on someone's plasma cutter for my plasma cutter clients. And I went over to his place, and he lived just outside of where I live. And of course, he lives in Florida, so I already knew what I was dealing with. And I got there, and I immediately recognized that the machine was in an area that it should not have been. Okay, plasma cutters, you're generating, you're dealing with sparks, you're dealing with welding, you're dealing with a lot of heat. And the reason I was there doing a service call, I'll be honest with you, was that the motor cables were shot. And he'd asked me, he said, why are they shot? Why do you think they've went? And, I've got to be honest with him. Granted, their use was there. I mean, he definitely used the machine, but they were just totally destroyed from the hot and the cold, and you're dealing with, an industrial type use, and then you're asking me, why are the cables shot? I mean, come on, guys. Really, I mean, you got to look at what you're doing. He could have saved himself, a couple $100 without having to replace all this stuff. Not to mention the steppers, they were starting to rust. I noticed some rust on the steppers, and when I'm telling him that, it sounds like I'm trying to upsell him when I'm really just being honest. Look at what you're doing. Look at what you're planning on doing. I cannot tell you that enough. If you plan on keeping your machine in an environment that does not suit that of a computer, and that's the easiest way to say it. If you wouldn't put a computer in the environment, or a computer is not meant to run in the environment, I highly recommend you thinking about getting involved in CNC. Because if you're going to keep a machine in an environment that is that of, like a bandsaw or a Dremel tool, you're going to find really quick that your equipment is not nearly going to have the longevity of one that is in a professional environment. And another thing you want to think of, especially while we're talking about environments, is if you have someone come to your shop, and I have had people do that occasionally. If I have someone come to my shop, I want to show that I'm professional. I don't want them to think that I'm Joe Blow and I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm just here making a buck. I could care less about what they want me doing. Have a little pride. Think about this not just in the aspect of, common sense tells us financially you should be thinking about, but think about it in the aspect that you're trying to present a product for resale. Have that quality there. Make the difference us. You know what I'm saying? You're doing this with that type of mentality. You're always going to go in and do the right choice. That's the big thing. But overall, as stated, cooling, it leads to a lot of different areas and venues. Once again, the controller is an obvious thing. I cannot specify it enough. Now you've got the evidence. I'm on Gecko's website. This one conclusionary paragraph of this experiment pertains to every driver on the market, whether it be Chinese, whether it be American. I don't care what it is. If it's electronic and it's controlling motion control, you should be looking at this and looking at it very, very closely. I just last week built another box for a gentleman who dealt with overheating and failure. Okay, and it was from one of those professional grade sites. I'm not going to mention the name. And again, the first thing out of his mouth was, I can't believe that they didn't integrate this from the beginning. But they're the first to tell you, and this is what I find humorous, they're the first to tell you, well, the reason it failed is because it overheated. Okay? But once again, they didn't include the components to do it correctly, or they'll charge you extra for the components to do it correctly. Think about that, guys. Think about it. Always think, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Always think that. If you don't, you're going to burn yourself. I hope this video was helpful. And again, I'm just going to pan back over. I'm going to go back over to that the picture of my client's image of what he just purchased used. Guys, if your stuff looks like this, he did purchase this system once again from, believe it or not, he purchased it from a guy in Florida, and he lives in Texas. If you are purchasing used equipment and you have any questions, I'm always there. Naturally, I'll help you out best I can. But definitely do your homework. Ask as many questions as possible. Look the equipment over. Look for the telltale signs of what you're looking at for use and where. And like I said, the environmental stress that's put on this equipment from not being in a proper environment, including not just an enclosure, being properly cooled, climate controlled. Again, think about that. Think about it. If you get, and I get this a lot, I can't do that. I get guys tell me, there's no way I can do that. Okay, then my suggestion is, if you can't do that, or I should say you won't, I never believe in I can't, it's more like I won't. If you can't do that or you won't do that, then you just have to accept what is. And accepting what is means don't be surprised when you have these bugs come up. And that's the first thing I'll ask them. Where is it? If I know where it is, are you willing to change it? No, well then at that point I'm done. I can only advise, I can only give you my years of experience and hope you take it, with recourse. If you don't, I'm doing everything I can do. There's that old saying, you lead a horse to water. It's the same thing. I mean, I'm not going to press it, but I'm telling you, do your homework, check it out. I hope I've helped at least one, and you guys are saving some money with this. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Once again, I'm Vince. Thank you. Take care. Check out eDealersdirect.com. Thank you.